Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to Shaping Tomorrow on IKIM Radio. I'm Syafiq Burhanuddin, Senior Research Officer at IKIM. With me to discuss the topic on reviving the economic vision of Islam is Dr. Adi Setia, who is a coordinator at the Worldview of Islam Research and Advisory. Dr. Adi, you have been teaching and writing extensively on the subject of economic thought and institutions in Islam, which you have articulated based on your vision or conception of Islamic gift economy or the Iqtisad al-Ihsani. But as far as from based on we know of your background, you started off with your postgraduate studies in Islamic thought at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization under the directorship of then Professor Syed Muhammad Aqib Al-Attas, and your research initially seemed to be more towards the area of philosophy of science. Well, we'd like to begin by knowing more in terms of what motivated you to go more towards the economic thought and economic institutions in Islam. Please, Doctor.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma rabbana shrah lana sadrana yassir lana umurana kaffir lana sayyi'at. Allahumma rabbana shrah lana sadrana yassir lana umurana kaffir lana sayyi'at. Right. Yes. Actually, there's no. There's no real departure from my chosen area of study at ISTAT. So, because history and I focus on history and philosophy of both Islamic and Western science, or at ISTAT. And by science, we mean the systematic study of both the natural and the cultural world, or the natural and the human world, or the social world. So science there includes both the natural sciences, the so-called exact sciences like mathematics, and the social sciences like economics, politics, linguistics. So it's all part of the same broader field of research. So that's okay. That's one thing. Yes. And the second thing is that there's no such thing as natural sciences. I mean, if you think of because nature does not study itself. Like for example, say like zoology, the study of animals, or botany, the study of plants. But who is doing the study? Are plants studying themselves in the field of biology, or is it rather that people or human beings called botanists who are doing the study of plants? Right. So from that point of view, even the so-called natural and exact sciences are at core totally social human sciences, subjected or constrained by human cultural background. So right, and so I mean it's part and partial of that broader field called history and philosophy of science.
Right. And also we have benefited tremendously from your translations of classical Arabic texts on mu'amalah, and it seems like you were from the get-go. It seems like you were determined to address a certain gap in existing research or thinking about economics. So what would you say there are certain gaps or issues that are being neglected in modern day discourses on Islamic economics or Islamic finance, and are there certain areas that you feel that, or do you feel that you want to address those this modern day discourse in those areas with when you set out to embark on research in this line, Dr. Adi?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Before I go into that second question,
Yes.
In my response to the first question, I mentioned that there's basically no demarcation between the natural and the social sciences, right? Because all sciences are human science in a sense that only human beings do science. Okay, that's one. And okay, now the immediate, and so what is that? Okay, apart from doing like studying the philosophy of the natural sciences, I had also been doing reading of the internet debates among Western economists, right? And especially in the wake of the 2007-2008 financial and economic crisis that impacted on the whole world. So there was a lot of rethinking about the meaning of economics and the purpose of the economy among Western thinkers, and among those thinkers in the West that kind of attracted me were people like E.F. Schumacher and Herman Daly and a few others who I sense were talking about an economy that is centered on people, on actual people, on livelihoods, and I thought, what does Islam, or what do Muslim scholars have to say in responding to the 2008 crisis that was largely caused by the dominant neoliberal financial capitalist system. What was, or what should have been then the corporate Islamic response to that crisis, and I found that that was not pretty lacking. So, but what you find is like that crisis caused or like motivated the so-called Islamic bankers and financial to be proud, to be it caused them to boast that that the so-called Islamic finance system was immune to such a after such a crisis, but there was no real systemic response from the Islamic point of view to that crisis. So anyway, so that, I'm just saying that is in addition to the reasons why I got attracted to investigate economic question, right?
Yes.
Okay, so coming to your second question is that, okay, what are the gaps or issues being neglected in modern discourse on Islamic economics, Islamic finance, and economics in general? Well, basically, there's a total neglect of the classical Islamic tradition on on money, on livelihood, on on uh, on economic organization, totally neglect of the classical text on the philosophy, on the ethics, on the adab, uh, on the teleology, or on the purpose of the economic life. There's total neglect in the dominant Islamic finance discourse, which purely about hijacking our legal fiqh of muamalah to serve the current mainstream neoliberal financial capitalist system. So especially a total disregard for the kasab tradition, the tradition on livelihood, on the tradition on the organization of livelihoods, which should be the proper definition of economy. And economy is all about how people organize their livelihoods. So the key question of livelihood is totally left out, and also and there's no integration between the moral, the moral and the ethical and and the the purpose of of the economic life, and thus the legal, I mean the third aspect of the economic discourse is kind of taken out of the larger underlying moral economy. So and finally, modern economics in general is all about abstract, the abstract corporation, the abstract financial system, abstract supply and demand, and abstract mathematics that is imposed on social reality rather than grounded in it. So modern economics basically totally neglect the substantive concerns of any true economic discourse, which is livelihood, people, right, culture. And to put that all in one word, it is a systematic neglect of social ecology or human ecology, right? And one big negative result of that, you find in Malaysia and elsewhere totally senseless so-called development projects that destroy people for the sake of purely monetary gain for the few.
Yes.
And that's happening all the time in Malaysia since ages ago, and now it's even worse. It's getting worse and worse. You have systematic land grabs. You have systematic destruction of ecosystem that in turn destroy the livelihoods of the local communities that depend on the ecosystem, all in the interest of absentee investor and bankers, and that has nothing to do with ensuring the welfare of communities.
Dr. Adi, if I can seek a clarification in terms of when you said about how basically the traditional fiqh mu'amala and have been sort of displaced from its actual context, right, in the Islamic civilization, and the fact that there's a pervasive, a greater dominance of Islamic finance, for instance, Islamic bank and finance, and in some instance, I noticed that Islamic economics has been sort of totally reduced to Islamic finance. What do you think is the reason for the sort of systematic neglect, as per your words, of the actual true discourse and true understanding of Islamic economics in the Islamic tradition? What had happened? I mean, how is it that we have overlooked this for decades?
I mean, like in Malaysia, when Anwar Ibrahim was invited into the government, and one of the big, I mean, the big agenda of the so-called Islamic Islamic movement then was the establishment of like Islamic Bank, right? But nobody, I think, nobody do serious analysis of the concept of bank, right? And when talk about Islamic finance, nobody has done any serious conceptual analysis of the term finance.
Yes.
Right. And so what they do is they pick and choose from the classical fiqh text, the text, the fiqh or the legal rules of transaction in Islam, and they which are basically like rules of commercial transaction, like rules of transaction, real goods and services. And fiqh of muamalah has nothing to do with finance as understood in the modern context, which is basically all about usurious or usurious or interest-based debt financing, right? See, but classical fiqh of muamalah is all about investment in real goods and services, and not about, has nothing to do with interest-based financial intermediation, right? Yeah. But what you see is that for instance, that famous book by Maulana Taghi Usmani, Introduction to Islamic Finance. When we open the book, basically, on one hand, it's all about how classical forms of classical transactional forms like musharaka and mudaraba can be used as financial instrument. But at the same time, the book failed to define what it means by the term Islamic finance, right? So I say, so nowhere you find there is the term finance defined. Nowhere in that book do you find the like keywords like economy defined, yes. Right? So what happened is that so when you have terms like bank or finance that is not subjected to rigorous analysis and redefinition according to the Islamic framework, so what you have is like you allow the former legal rules to be hijacked, like the former legal rules of commercial transaction, I mean in real goods and services, to be hijacked to fit into the former usurious debt-based credit intermediation system,
Mm.
right? So you have corrupted a equity, basically an equity based commercial transactional rules of trade in real goods and services, and you corrupted that into to fit into the into the debt based interest or usurious credit mediation, right?
Right. Dr. Adi, as we mentioned earlier, you undertook a painstaking sort of academic labor by translating the great literatures, great books from Arabic on this subject of economic thought, economic institutions in Islam into English, and then you sort of, if I can say that you attempted to reformulate or restate it in the contemporary context, and hence terming it as the Islamic gift economy or Iqtisad al-Ihsani. How would you situate that attempt of yours vis-a-vis existing literatures or attempts which are already being calling themselves as Islamic economics, something that has probably been there since the 1970s. So how would you situate your approach towards economic thought and economics in Islam in relation to other attempts, Dr. Adi?
I mean, now I think that the main purpose of translating those texts is to give readers readers is to give English readers direct access to the classical thought of the great thinkers of the past, to
Right.
let to let the tradition speak for itself without like reading modern concerns or modern concepts or modern baggage into into the system of the past, right? So we need to do that by referring directly to the sources, by reading Arabic, if you can read Arabic, or at least by reading accurate English translation of the
Right.
text. So, and only then with direct access to the classical text that can you, and then reading them and trying to understand in their context, right? Some of course you read the text, but so you have to kind of do research or kind of have an idea of the immediate social intellectual background in which those texts were written, and so when you read those texts and understand the context, the largely tacit or implicit context in which those texts were written, then you get an idea of uh, of of the economic vision of Islam, right?
Mm.
And with that, you can kind of like rearticulate that vision in modern terms. Like you can, okay, this is the Islamic conception of uh, of the economy, and plus related concepts like money and trade
Yep.
and welfare. Yeah, so with that, you can have like a conceptual framework
Mm.
rooted in the tradition and re-articulated in modern language of discourse. So once you have that framework, then only then that you can engage modern economics, and only then can you write responsible books on Islamic economics.
Right.
Otherwise, what you have is so-called Islamic economics textbook or popular books. When you read them, I mean, it's like yeah, they cite, they may mention some scholars in the past like Ibn Khaldun or Taimiyah and so on, and then say see Ibn Khaldun also mentioned about division of labor and Al-Ghazali, and so they tend to read the modern baggage into those into those texts, right? Because this writer fails to do the arduous job of firstly eliciting a cogent Islamic framework from those texts first, right? But what they do is that the point of departure is modern economic is the modern economic framework, and the key terms and key concepts that govern that framework, which they got imbued with in their education. I mean, many of these writers, the first background is training in modern economics and modern finance.
Yes.
So the mindset has been kind of framed by the modern economic framework, and they use that framework to approach the cluster
Right.
text. So in the process, they read modern concerns onto into or out of the cluster text. A case in point is that too many people translate infra as consumption.
Right.
Too many people just translate, for example, like or they use the word, or I mean, they like infra as consumption, and they simply assume that the modern concept of the division of labor is equivalent to what was discussed by let's say by Ibn Khaldun or Al-Ghazali, without realizing that the concept of labor, the concept of work in the tradition is different from the current meaningless atomized work that most people get stuck in, that has no meaning. By work, in the past, the people were craft people. They were not in no way doing work like the most factory workers are doing. So what we have is actually not so much a division of labor, but a differentiation of vocation. So what we find in the past, not the so-called modern division of labor right into the tradition, but what we actually find in the tradition is vocational differentiation, and that is a totally different concept than the modern meaningless division of labor, right? They give no meaning to they give no meaning to the job of the factory worker. So division of labor, that is the modern concept, right?
Yeah.
But when we understand the traditional notion of work, what we see is that what they have in mind is, in modern terms, should be better described by the term vocational differentiation.
Indeed, Dr. Adi, I think the importance of really understanding the key terms or vision, as well as the framework of the subject matter, such as the economic thought in Islam, is of great significance, because I think this is could be the reason why a great deal of this wisdom has not been able to, or a lot of these teachings are not being able to be practiced in today's context, because it's starting on a confused ground to begin with. So I think it's a very significant work that you're doing. Unfortunately, Doctor, this is the only time we have for this episode. Inshallah, we hope to have a second part of this introductory discussion with you on the subject of reviving the economic vision of Islam. Thank you once again, Dr. Adi.
Thank you, Ikim and Shafiq and your team for the opportunity.
Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.